All right. So when you guys log in, this will be the nice thing, like I was just saying, regarding the Moodle site. So down here in your weekly grade submissions, weekly assignments, weekly quizzes, notes, what I'll probably do is in the weekly assignments, I'll post the videos. So if there's someone in quarantine, they're not here like the next, because he's not back until September, I think. So I'll record the classes so he can follow along. Um, yeah, so you'll see those on there, and I'll post them as notes. So if you miss anything too, if you're absent that day, you guys can come back and see that. And then I'll put a link to my YouTube channel because all this stuff I'll just put on my teacher's YouTube account. But for today, I'll go over a couple things with you guys just to make sure we're aware of this. So tomorrow, well, today we're going to start in the notes, which I just passed out to you guys. We'll get to those here in a moment. But tomorrow is going to be a revisitation of our Friday events. Right. So the first thing on Friday will be your grade submission. So you'll come in and you will. It's not up yet. It'll open up at 8 o'clock. They'll have that open. Submit your grade. Type your grade in. Submit. That's the first step for tomorrow. The second thing is going to be, if you haven't finished it yet, which most of you guys have, is that things you should know about the Bill of Rights, and that was this website that allows for all that, right? So that website there, and then this is the PDF, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Okay. Next week, I'll show you guys how to submit it digitally, just so we have that idea of how to do that. Um, if by some chance I forget or whatever happens, then this right here is an instructions on how to save the PDF and submit it on a PDF. Okay. The third thing will be the quiz, right? So in order for tomorrow, it'll actually go grade, quiz, and then the 8 things you should know. And then the quiz is going to be mostly vocab, so you'll be able to use the vocab that you have. Um, I want to say there's 55 words. I'm not going to use all 55, probably like 10 or 15 of them, but it's going to be pure vocab, so there should be no real major issues. And then the other one is questions from today. So anything we talk about today, there might be 1 or 2 questions. It's not going to be a ton from today's conversations, but you'll see those on the quiz tomorrow. That will be priority number 2. So grade, quiz, and then you guys can go back and finish this. And then this is the next step. This is actually a little bit of history for us. I will tell you right now, and I'll just be upfront, it's not the most exciting assignment in the world. It's a lot of historical stuff. You are allowed to collaborate and work with each other and help out with the answers. By collaborate, I mean I'll do question 1, you do question 2, not I'll sit here and watch you do all the work and then just give me your worksheet and I'll fill it in for you. Right. So make sure you guys are helping each other out. That's fine. But this one's the same basic idea. There's the PDF. If you want to do the physical version and you want to type in it, you're more than welcome to do that. Or you can write it out. I'll give you that yellow sheet tomorrow. And this is the website. And this is what I'm talking about. There's a decent amount of reading, right? But it's broken up. So the Articles of Confederation, let me go back and show you guys the PDF itself. And then you'll see questions from the Articles of Confederation. And then you'll see it says the delegates. If you come back to the website, all of your answers from the delegates right in here. Okay. So again, just so you guys have that. This is new. Okay. Questions you guys can think of before tomorrow or things that you need help with now? Ethan, you know which one to print to? Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so open up the printer. So go to print. Okay. Does it give you the choices? Yeah, so go down to SS 228. You'll see SS 228 hallway, I think. And if you print that, that's the one at the end of the hallway. And yeah, that one more step of signing into Google. Okay. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. There will be, I think, 2 questions, 1 to 2 questions from the podcast. So remember, the one of them will be revolving around the is freedom of speech universal? Which the answer is no. It's government organizations can't limit your freedom of speech. but private companies can. So it'll be along those lines. So just look for those. And the podcast will stay open too. So if you need to, bring your earbuds and you can hook yourself into the system or plug yourself in. Did you guys get earbuds from your English teachers? Okay, so you can use those as well. Yes.
For the vocab questions, are those going to be like multiple choice or short?
Most of them will be multiple choice. There might be like a matching where I have on the left side all of the definitions, and then on the right it'll be a box. You click on it, and it has a drop down of like 5 or 6 words or 10 words. So, yeah. Okay. Well, good. This is economics notes. Let's go ahead and pull out government notes. So this is our first official discussion. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Where did it just go? What just happened?
Dropping stuff. This stuff here, right?
I'll take it right here.
Oh.
Thank you. Um, Give me a second here. My folder with everything in it literally just disappeared on me. That was weird. There we go. All right. It's freaking out there for a second. It's a lot of...
What
Yeah.
class? We were just walking down there. What class was that? They always walk down the door and take the blue shirts.
Could be IT.
Oh,
It typically takes them on a walk around now. Just gets them out of the lab for a little bit. Okay. There we go. So we are getting into Bill of Rights first, and then the following amendments. But there's a lot of discussion under the first 4 or 5. Well, actually, yeah, first 5 or 6, 7, 8. Eight's kind of fun. Anyways, the one thing too that comes up though in this is the difference between civil rights and civil liberties. Does anybody want to give a guess as to what they think the difference is between those two ideas? Civil liberties versus civil rights. It's one of those small, unique little differences between the two. Good. civil liberties, civil rights. One of them is not to be touched. One of them is to be given protection. Which one do you think is the one that's not to be touched and they can't take those rights away from you? Liberties or rights?
Liberties.
Liberties. Yep. Freedom of a citizen to exercise customary rights as speech or assembly without unwarranted or arbitrary interference by the government. So they are not allowed to take away those rights. These, if you've ever read the Declaration, these are inalienable rights endowed by your Creator. So these are life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. But that's the basic idea: is you cannot have these taken away. So when we talk about freedom of speech, can't take that away from you. That's a God-given right. Freedom of religion, can't take it away. That's something that the governments must stay away from. And they all, every single civil liberty, you'll see them play around with this. Okay? Such as a right of guaranteed by the laws of the U.S. country, as in the U.S. by the Bill of Rights. So these are guaranteed. You cannot take anything away from you. We're not supposed to be able to. You're protected to have these natural civil liberties. Civil rights is when they actually create laws to provide protection, right? Or they change the laws to adjust for making sure everyone's being equally represented. So the big ones typically are the 13th and the 14th. 13th is essentially getting rid of slavery. Right? So no, we cannot. We're going to change our laws to not allow a citizen of the United States to be treated any differently. The rights to full legal, social, economic equality extended to the blacks will be one of the examples. 14th Amendment was the whole voting rights, making sure equal protection under the law. So as we get to Supreme Court cases later on, you will see every single Supreme Court case will say 1st and 14th, 3rd and 14th, 8th and 14th. Everything goes back to the 14th because it forces all of the states to follow the Bill of Rights as well. Up to the 14th, you guys have probably heard of Jim Crow laws in history class. All the southern states, a lot of the southern states and some northern states created laws that would basically keep the black slaves, former slaves, from getting involved in anything. So no, they'd have poll tests, or you have to take a test to vote. And when people sued them in court, there was no 14th Amendment at the time. They were saying that's a federal law. So if it's for the presidency, you're right, we can't stop you from voting for the president. But we can stop you from voting for a state legislature or a local municipality or a sheriff or all those local things. So there was so the 14th now adjusts it and says, no, everything's across the board. All right, so let's get into this. First Amendment, right? So this is one of the first original ones, 1791. You'll see this on the first 10 amendments. Freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. And as you guys remember or we might remember from the podcast, one of the issues with petition is it's the last one mentioned and people don't really think about it as much. But it happens more than I think we realize. On a quick tangent off of that, anybody Brunswick people in here? Okay. So you guys know have you guys driven through Brunswick, you three? Okay. So if you drive through Brunswick, there is a lovely Starbucks. What's right next to it? Hothead Burritos. There's a dental place, and now there's another store that used to be a Pizza Fire. So that, yeah, right? And then there's a Harris. So that was supposed to originally be Get-Go, and that was where they were going to put the Get-Go right across the street from Giant Eagle, which kind of makes sense physically. They shut down where the Chick-fil-A is. That used to be their gas station. It was kind of awkward. Didn't really quite work. So the Get-Go is going to go across the street in that little area. And they moved forward with plans, and they had everything set up and ready to go. And all of a sudden, the people of the city of Brunswick petitioned the city council and said, we need you to change this location. So yes, we know the city's moving forward with this, but we need you guys to change where it's going to be located. Yes.
Isn't that happening in Medina too with like the sheets?
I think I remember hearing, but where's the sheet supposed to be going?
I don't know exactly, but there's like a church that's upset because it's in their view.
Okay. Yeah, probably. I'm not sure if they're gonna get, if it's just a view thing, I don't think they'll win that one. They might, if they get enough people to go to city council, or they give them an alternate location. But the Brunswick one, for those who are aware, behind where that Starbucks is, there's a whole bunch of houses, a little development back there. That whole massive neighborhood got together and went to the city of Brunswick and said, listen, you can't do this because if I'm put a get-go there, the only easy way out is to bypass the light because it's such an awkward getting out. You have to go to the light, turn left, wait for the light. I'll just turn right, go through the neighborhood, get over to North Carpenter or South Carpenter, which is right there, and I'll just use that street. So they were going to go through the neighborhood. So the neighborhood petitioned the government of Brunswick and said, you can't do this. So that's why Get-Go got moved over to where, if you guys remember, it used to be at Bob Evans way before they tore it down and put that like empty field there. So, but that was a petition one. Another one we've had all sorts of different ones in Ohio. Like we had the marijuana, try to legalize that. That's a petition in the government to try to have the law changed. Smoking ban that we have in Ohio, that's a petition that was a group got together and they developed that. So petitions really do kind of come out a lot more than we think. All right, so now this one, the one thing that I found interesting, and you typically hear about this a lot, is the very, very first protection or civil liberty is Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. So we hit religion the very first thing out of the gate. They don't go right to freedom of speech. A lot of people say First Amendment, and they go, freedom of speech. That's right. It's not technically correct though. The very first thing is freedom of religion. Now, this is where we have to remember our history. Right? So where did we come from? What kind of government did we come from originally?
The British.
It was British, and then British was
Monarchy.
Anybody want to know what religion they were? Catholic. Yeah, they were Catholic, and they also had Anglican under King Henry VIII. I am. He actually created the Anglican Church because the Catholic Church wouldn't let him divorce his eighth wife, and so he's like, "That's fine. We'll just leave and make our own church." So if you ever hear of the Anglican Church, it's King Henry VIII started that one. But it became a very, very one of the reasons we left England, right? Bloody Mary. You guys know that story of Bloody Mary? Basically went after all the Protestants. If you weren't Catholic, you were going to get killed. So that was a whole story there. So we came from that. We have the Pilgrims that left. So one of the mainstays, the one thing they wanted to be protected was your right to a government not involved in religion. What's happened is over the years that things have gotten skewed and the government kind of steps in and says, no, you can't, yes, you can, to the religious communities. But originally it was supposed to be set up as we'll stay out of your way. This is your religion. Right? Freedom of religion, you get to choose it. We won't make any laws restricting that. So we as the state, so this actually kind of goes back to this whole lovely public situation. So like the Career Center, if I was to put a nativity scene out front during Christmas time, is that legal? Technically it's not illegal. But if I put the nativity scene out, have I, the government, Medina County Career Center, because we're a representative of the county government, have I chosen a religion? If I just put out the Christian one, right? So if I would do that, then I also have to put out the Jewish. I have to put Kwanzaa out there. I have to put any other religion out there because I can't just pick one. I have to pick them all, and that's a lot of work. So what do most government entities then do? Forget it. We just won't put anything out there. That way we avoid this whole situation. Because if we were to start the day with prayer and say, all right, everyone bow your head, and then at the end of it, it said, in Jesus' name, amen. Would we, the government entity of the Medina County Career Center, have chosen a religion? Yes, right? If we were to have ended our prayer or started our prayer with the Quran and read through some of the things from the Muslim faith, would we have chosen? Yes. Okay. So the moment of silence is just that. It's supposed to be, if you are a Christian, then you take that moment and you pray If you're a Muslim, you take that moment and you pray. If you are Satanist, you take that moment and pray. If you are a pagan, you take that moment and pray. That's your moment. Because it used to be way back when all the adjustments over the years, we used to allow prayer in schools. And then, of course, we were sued because the school systems are government entities and we can't represent just one. So that went away. So they said a moment originally it was, please bow your heads for a silent moment of prayer. Well, that left out the atheists and the agnostics and some other groups that don't pray. So that wasn't, so we established religion over non-religion. Okay, we can't do that. So we got a moment of silence. Now, like in the morning, we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Do you guys have to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? We ask you to, out of respect, but you don't have to. And I've had students in the past that will just sit there and they'll just keep on their phone. Right? They're entitled to that. We used to have a Veterans Day, and we would always allow for the students who didn't agree with it to go to the area, student services area, and just hang out up there. But again, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. So no one religion will ever be in there. Now, here's a quick question. Do you guys know where it says separation of church and state in the Constitution? Nowhere in the Constitution, nor the Declaration, nor the Emancipation Proclamation, none of our documents anywhere where our government has separation of church and state. That's actually, you'll hear that a lot in the news. There needs to be a separation of church and state, which is, it's been skewed since the origins of it. Jefferson was a Methodist, and one of the churches that was Methodist sent him a letter and said, oh, good, now that you're president, you can do all these things to help out the church. And his response to them in his personal letter was, no, there needs to be a separation of church and state. We, the government, do not get involved in you, the church. That's your thing. So there's that. That's the other reason why we can, like, has anybody ever been to a Bible study or heard of Bible studies at your schools? So I've had them in my classroom in the past, but that's because the kids came to us and asked, can we have a Bible study? Sure, but I had to have a representative there to monitor the situation. So the kids would come in and they'd have a Bible study, and then the bell would ring and they would all leave and go to their classes. That also applies to satanic groups, to any Muslim students, to any pagan students. So if a satanic group of kids got together and said, hey, we want to do our study of our Bible, the school would say, okay, Mr. Crossy, can you open your room to the Satanists they want to have a Bible study? Sure. So if I allow it for one, we allow it for everyone. This is actually what we call the Establishment Clause. So if you ever hear anyone say Establishment Clause, that's that first one. I can't establish anything. The second one, and this is where we get a little bit more complicated, is or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So I'm not allowed to inhibit your religious practices. Now there are situations, again, kind of like yelling bomb on a plane, there are limitations to that. So if you want to practice your religion, that's perfectly fine. Do you guys know one of the big issues on Halloween with satanic groups or pagan groups like Wiccans is there tends to be, I'm not saying it's 100% of the time, but there tends to be animal sacrifice. And so they'll actually send out, like if you ever look at the city blotters, they'll talk about pets disappearing during this time of the year. So keep your pets inside, make sure that your black cats and black dogs are safe inside. So if you have a black cat or black dog, keep that in mind. Around Halloween time, watch your cats and your dogs and pets. Because that will be an infringement on your right. That's my dog, it's my property, you can't take my property. Goats, that's another one that they'll sacrifice goats for certain rituals. Now, if they buy their own goat and it's their goat and they sacrifice their goat, that's one thing. But if they take your goat or your dog, right? So there are some limitations. I can't do human sacrifice either. That's not allowed. That would be considered murder. Yes, it might be part of your religious practices. We're going to limit that one, though. We're not going to allow that one to happen. So they're not supposed to be prohibiting the free exercise there. This actually became a big one during COVID. That was like huge, if you guys remember any of the news stories. Because there was all sorts of weird angles on this. There was people that were just having, they were having church outside. I think this was at Michigan. And again, you'll see different states have different, like Ohio, was okay for the most part with like outdoor meetings. So people would go to the churches and the priest or the pastor would have a big speaker system, or they were getting like the one channel set to their station, or the lot like my church did. Everything was Wi-Fi. Everything was produced, and you would watch it live, but it was streaming. So you had that version. But there were some of the states that were arresting people for showing up to the outdoor events because you weren't supposed to be within 6 feet of somebody. But there was all sorts of issues with that. But that was a lot of churches actually filed lawsuits against the states because it was all state issues, saying you can't prohibit us from doing this. You can't stop us. And the government kind of superseded it and said, yeah, but it's for the betterment of the society or the betterment of the community. So a lot of like at the local levels, a lot of these churches were getting stopped by the local courts, but then they would appeal it, and some of the state supreme courts are coming back and saying, "Yeah, state of Ohio, sorry, you can't stop them from meeting. If they want to take the risk of getting COVID, then they can take the risk of getting COVID, but you can't stop them because we can't create laws prohibiting the free exercise thereof." Abridging the freedom of speech, keeping in mind too, I think even in the podcast I said speech isn't necessarily just the physical words coming out of your mouth. Has anybody ever been in an argument with someone who just crossed their arms and gave you that look? That says a lot. I know that when I was younger, my dad would get mad at me. He would just give me this look, and I'd be like, oh no. Or if I saw my mom around the corner and she had that look, you're like, she found me. Or if it's a relationship arguments, there's that hip thing girls tend to do, that bend in the knee, that little thing. Yeah, that says a lot. Or sometimes words that mean one thing, but they don't really mean that. But no, I'm fine. Okay, you're not fine. But yeah, we can't really prohibit your freedom of speech. That was actually includes symbolic speech too. So one of the big cases was Texas v. Johnson. That was the burning of an American flag. It was on the steps of this Texas State House, and some guy took a U.S. flag and burnt it, lit it on fire and burnt it, and he got attacked by a mob of people, and they were punching him and tried to protect the flag. In the end, he had an issue because he didn't ask for permission to do this, because you're supposed to go with the peaceful protest, peaceful assembly, I should say. But the people that actually attacked him were in violation of his civil rights or civil liberties, because they attacked him and he was doing something that he was essentially allowed to do. But does burning the flag say something? Yeah. There was actually a former Supreme Court justice who passed away back in 2016, Antonin Scalia. He was interviewed at one point, and he said, "If it was up to me personally, I'd kick his butt. I'd like fight. I would be so mad at this." But from the judge's perspective, as a Supreme Court justice, he has his right to freedom of speech. He's allowed to say something that way. There's been a couple of interesting ones too. There was one. This actually happened in Cleveland. The KKK did their whole peaceful assembly. So they got permission from the city of Cleveland. They got the route cleared, and they had a parade down the middle of downtown Cleveland, all the way to where that big, huge free, upside down, backwards free stamp is. And they had a big, huge rally right there. It wasn't like 3 days, or it was just like an afternoon. And then they had the irony. This is where irony works really, really well. The police that were protecting the KKK march were involved. All of the ones that were involved, and they asked for volunteers, were Jewish and black police officers that lined the sidewalks protecting the KKK. So again, irony, KKK, all about pure white American and anti-Jewish, anti-black, and they surrounded them with Jewish and black police officers. But they went through the right routes, and the other thing about that one is if anyone tried to jump into the parade to attack the KKK members, they would be violating their civil liberties to peacefully assemble. So, yeah, and that also goes along with the speech. Press is a big one. This is one. Has anyone ever heard the press as the fourth branch of the government? This is randomly, you'll hear that now that I said it, it might pop up here and there. They have so much information out there. The hope is that they're being honest with us about all the information that they're providing. But yeah, There's something called the Pentagon Papers. There was a whole Supreme Court case about that under Nixon, where he tried to kibosh all the news media to not release Pentagon Papers that showed that we should never have been involved in the Vietnam War, and that was extended way too long. And the Pentagon had come up with tons and tons of documentation about why we shouldn't be in Vietnam because of how it was not going to be a success. But like I think it goes back to JFK. It was JFK all the way up through Nixon where we had people in Vietnam. So we're looking at 40, 50 years. And the Pentagon the whole time didn't know we should be there, we should be there. And then the papers were leaked to the media, and there was a Supreme Court case about it, and the Supreme Court found in favor of the press. No, presidents, Nixon, you can't stop them from printing the stuff. It's public records. Now, we live in the Freedom of Information Act age. So after 9/11, if you guys wanted to get information from any public entity, all you got to do is on Freedom of Information Act. I'm not sure who you would contact, but you can put a writ in, and they have to send you all the documentation because it's public information. So freedom of press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble. Peaceably to assemble. And this is the big one. The big key is peaceful assembly. And this is where we talked about the Black Lives Matter movement last summer. Some of the Antifa stuff, where they had the riots and they were burning things. That's definitely not peaceably assembling. So a lot of those governors who are following up with that try to do some of the stuff, try to take people to jail for that. This also includes the peaceably assembling on January 6th, which is now a big, huge thing at the federal level. They're doing an investigation into who was involved. Did find out, the FBI just came out last week with findings that there was no plan, like there was nothing that they found in all the research that was a planned event. It wasn't something that was like organized prior to January 6th. It was just an event that happened on January 6th. So there was no pre-planning of that one. But those people, I know that they're going after a lot of people to arrest them for vandalizing federal property. And then petition the government for a redress of your grievances. Like I said, that's the big one where you guys, we as citizens, can actually go and have things adjusted and or changed if we want to. There we go. So this is a little continuation of what I said, so I apologize. No law can be made respecting in one religion. No law can be made to take away the freedom of speech. And that's at the public level, right? I can limit your speech in schools, and I can limit your speech at private institutions. Right, so I kind of already gave this answer. Does the constitutional right to freedom of speech apply to students while at school? It does to a degree. Right? We'll even get the freedom of press. There's a couple court cases about that. Can you guys, if you were like doing the student newspaper, print anything you wanted to in the student newspaper? No, the school still has a limitation on what's printed. One of the whole court case with that one actually goes back to, I have to look at the name of the court, Hazelwood v. Kuhlmeyer, which I don't know how that just ran back in my head. But if that's the court case, if I was right about that one, it was a part of the teacher that was in charge of the newspaper. They were doing a expose on a girl that was pregnant, or pregnancy in schools, and they interviewed one of the girls, and all of the questions that they asked and everything they put in the article, if any one of you guys would have been able to read it and go, oh, that's Jenny from such and such a class. Like, I know who they're talking about here. So they didn't do the whole, like, they didn't do informational research. They did an expose on a person. And so the teacher was like, no, I don't want to bring poor Jenny into an article. So we kiboshed that one. And then the other one was dealing with divorce. And in the article, it was all from the mom's perspective. So they interviewed the mom of the divorce situation, but they didn't interview the dad. So the teacher said, no, you have to interview the dad and the mom to get both of their perspectives if you're talking about divorce. And so he pulled it from simple, like, grading situations, and they took it to court, and the Supreme Court found in favor of the schools limiting that stuff. Oh, wow. We're about done. Quick answer, yes. Tinker v. Des Moines is the one that we're going to talk about, and that's the armbands. You guys remember hearing about the black armbands during Vietnam? So when I show you guys the podcast or listen to the podcast on Monday with you guys, that'll be it's about the Tinkers. There's actually one that came around from the 1990s. All right, so you're probably going to see only questions about the First Amendment tomorrow because that's all we got through, and vocab and the podcast. Okay. Time flies when you're having fun. See ya tomorrow.